I'm going to start with you, Deepak. Um, how do you generally initiate a product idea? I mean, if somebody has a product idea, what do you tell them, and how possibly would you initiate it?
Sure. So just to kind of add color to what Shiva told me, told about me. So I have been in and out of Microsoft. So Microsoft just can't get rid of me. So that's one of the key things. I've had stints at Google and Myntra. Google, I was the site head for product experience at Seattle as well as India. And in Myntra, I was the chief product officer. So I have initiated a few products. Now, how many of you guys over here create products?
Yeah,
Good. That's a good bunch.
Good bunch, yeah.
We're all brimming with ideas, aren't we? Absolutely. Fantastic. I heard only one of you, but still. But let me tell you this. I think we are all minions, like the movie Minions. Throughout the entire product development process, to our users, right from product definition to actually generating ideas, to screening those ideas, and finally building and iterating on an idea. So for clarity and purpose, how do you start? How do you initiate a product? And I would like to think that the product definition is key. And Moki has been saying tweet, tweet, tweet. Well, the way you start, or at least I start, is with a memorable tweet, which encapsulates the user need, user want, user desire. Hopefully unmet, but sometimes it's not even recognized. Users sometimes don't even know what they want. But the reason I say a memorable tweet is a tweet. It encapsulates in a short, sweet, concise manner. And memorable, it's not the first thing that comes into your mind. It's probably not even the 10th, probably not even the 100th. It's something that you refine over and over again. And I think that's very, very key. And over my time, at least I've seen a few memorable tweets. One of them, at least at Microsoft, was, this was back in the day when iPhone was introduced. So we had to kind of say, hey, what is our value prop? And one of the key things was phone in pocket to phone taking a picture in 2 seconds. That was one of the key things that we did with Windows Phone 7. Another one that I actually, that's really dear to my heart right now, which is I want an intelligent assistant that warns me, actually yes, warns me if my 2 naughty sons are up to something naughty. Yeah, that's what I want. So yeah, so what I would like to say is finally that a memorable tweet actually gives clarity and purpose throughout your entire product development process. So that's how you initiate your product. So yeah.
Vinay, the next question is for you. So what can you say about the entire research, and how can the method in which you do your research help startups and people who have ideas right now?
You know, one really cool thing that I've, 2 people came up to me very recently, was that they got that idea, and this is a really nice idea of their product, was that they spent a month trawling the online forums that they were already part of. And when people were bitching about how something doesn't work, or that's when they had their product idea. And it's pretty genuine, because you have real people, you know, talking about real wants and real needs and real desires. I think the main thing is really, to me, is the market. You can have an idea, but you know, to me, most of the time, I was just discussing this with Abhijit as well this morning, is that the market somehow squeezes out the right idea from the right guy. It's, you know, there's no other science to it, really. There's a lot of effort that you can do to of course, you know, to make a great idea work really, really well, and we're seeing that happen. But from what I've seen, where it's really worked well, it's just like the confluence of forces. I hate to say it, but that's really what I've noticed, yeah.
So confluence of forces is the research. Next question, sorry. Go ahead, have you done?
No,
Yeah,
so the other research methods to find an idea, really, is, you know, the traditional management method of opportunity mapping, or whether you call it ethnographic research or user studies. It's all very similar. I think it's been done to that, really. There's only so much more that we can squeeze out of it. Today, the reason why you still do it is because it's the minimum that you need to do to make sure that your idea is safeguarded. It's, you know, that it holds water.
Jay, you've had a product idea for a while now, and Looks like you're going to go with it at some point of time. So what's the story? How did you start? How did it occur to you?
So I think I've been working with product ideas for many years every now and then, and I think the same story goes for Adobe, Microsoft, etc. You have a bunch of things, you incubate in-house, you take it out. I think every product idea pretty much starts with a problem. Sometimes it's articulated, sometimes it's not articulated, and I think the not articulated ones are the most interesting ones. When I talked about markets, I think if you look at markets, I don't know, have you guys heard or read the Clue Train Manifesto? By any chance? Do read it up. Clue Train Manifesto is a 1990s kind of manifesto on the net. It talks about markets are conversations. It's about technology enabling human beings to talk to each other. And I think if you look at the whole bunch of things around you, it's enabling conversations in very different ways. And I think that's the start of a great product idea, for me at least. When I would say, hey, does this work? Does this not work? What's broken here? Why is it not working? And I think that conversation is what leads you to refine your product. Sometimes, I think I have seen in many large companies, and we have worked with a bunch of companies. When I was part of Adobe, I've worked with Microsoft as well, and so on. I think sometimes in these large companies, there are solutions looking for problems. I think the idea is a problem which is to look for a solution. I think that's very, very important. Because you'll find all sorts of solutions, very thinly sized solutions, kind of bigger solutions, and so on and so forth. You are almost like uncovering a solution. It's like a piece of rock that you've got. It's like the Michelangelo, as he said, I can see the David inside that. You are chipping away, and you don't know exactly what your David is. I think that's the sort of product definition or product uncovering that I see a lot, kind of. And that's at least the process for me.
Hope you find it, David, soon.
Thank you.
And the next question is generic for all of you. I think it'd be good if you pitch in. What do you think is the key Indian challenge in this entire stuff, especially in understanding the context, the users, the market, as you say, or the confluence of forces, as Vinay said? Deepak?
Yeah, so the Indian market is, I think, unique. It's there are MNCs trying to take it. There are homegrown forces trying to take it. It's a land of opportunity. So actually, the challenges are probably one way to spin it. But I think with the challenges comes a bunch of opportunities. The lack of infrastructure, the lack of legacy, just enables us to kind of have opportunities to leapfrog all of that and come up with solutions that are completely new, or, ingenuous, things that are, done from the ground up just for here, and that can be taken to other markets as well. So I think if you actually, again, study the users, follow the users, to a large extent, I think Vinay kind of mentions that you can only do it so much. And yes, but patterns are changing so dramatically that there are some nuggets that you just need to strike, and then boom, you come up with a new product idea, yeah.
Jay?
Yeah, I think it's a bunch of, we are at a very interesting confluence of too many things. And I think it's a matter of observing, seeing. I think we tend to see things, one of the problems that we have is we tend to, when we describe things, let's say a solution is a LinkedIn of X, or this is a Twitter of Y. I think some of our kind of paradigms are very rooted in Western companies. I think you need to unroot that, and you need to find your roots here to problems which are very unique and very different. I think we have a problem of complexity of languages, technology reach, scripts, so on and so forth. So what are the sort of things which unite? And how can we find the services? And we tend to find services. I think the other thing is, of course, the short-termism. When we're looking at kind of building a company, selling it off, making a profit, getting out of it. I think look at the larger, deeper sort of building organizations. I think product versions come and go, organizations stay on. And I think that's probably the real kind of difference that can be made in India especially.
The question was about challenges, right?
That's correct. That's specific to India.
Right. So I think the biggest challenge in the companies and then in our own efforts really is actually in just what you mentioned, which is building a company. One caveat to what I said earlier about research being sort of hitting its point is that we still advocate about 12 hours of research for everyone on any team. That's independent of what their practice is, software engineers, hardware engineers, even user interface designers and so on. It's not just the designers get out there or researchers to get out there. So that's got to be done anyway. That's another challenge. The other challenge is actually really is, and it's actually getting people out of the office. It is difficult to spend a lot of time out when your markets are really not right around you. India is a large country. If you're trying to sell something in Ramnagar, you're lucky to be in Bangalore. If you're trying to sell something in Roorkela and you want to go study something there, yeah, well, a week or more is gone. And that is a challenge to me. And the second one is, in general, putting an enterprise together with a lot of young people. Yeah, it's the old man and me talking, but it is a little difficult. There's people hopping, and they didn't know what they really signed up for, and so on. Yeah, that sort of stuff.
Sure. Sure. So we move on to the next phase, right? It's about actually designing and innovating on the product itself. So the first question goes again to Deepak, and you can't pass the question in this. No, it's not a quiz. Yeah. So, what are the drivers in designing an optimal product? What do you think are the key drivers in designing an optimal product?
So I think Maslow's pyramid, I think, is a very useful reference. For those who don't know, does everyone know Maslow's pyramid? For those who don't, it's Maslow was a psychologist. He kind of had a hierarchy of needs for every individual. It starts, and you can only progress to the next need if you satisfy the base need. It starts off with physiological, which is your roti, kapda, makan. Goes on to safety and security. Unless you do that, you can't go on to being loved by family and friends. And then you go on to self-esteem, which is what am I doing? And finally, the topmost, which is self-actualization, which is I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. I think most of us here are probably vacillating in the top 3 stages. So for an optimal product, I would think you could have something like that, a pyramid, which is unless you satisfy one, you can't go to the next. And I think a product has to be useful. Unless it is useful, there's no point going it any further. So the product has to satisfy a basic human need, want, or desire. Once it does that, it has to be usable. If it needs to be usable, and then after that, it has to be desirable. If you just skip any of these products, it just becomes a novelty factor, a fad, probably for 5 minutes, and then people just discard it. So for an optimal product, useful, usable, desirable, are the 3 key phrases that I would like to use to kind of actually build that. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Vinay, so tell us a story. You worked with kind of a multidisciplinary teams. It's about hardware, software, wearables, consumer electronics. So what were the learnings? Is there any learning from a story that you can tell us?
Yeah, my first reaction to that is I think, we are at the designers in general are at the receiving end of a lot of opinion. But within all that, I think one of the fundamental things that we do as a profession, as a practice is assimilate and synthesize multiple tunnel visions. There's someone who comes from operations, there's someone who comes from vendor management, there's someone who comes from community relations, there's someone who comes from, all the issues with the fact that he can't make a small PCB when, phones are getting 7 mm thick. And you have to work with everyone to sort of like accommodate their concerns and still get what you want out of it in the end. I think it's more, you might call the design management, but that's a very strong role that we play. The second thing is, I think it's never been more important for us to get certain kinds of exposure to certain users because markets are extremely intolerant. I mean, you might spend, there's some software products that you can build in a weekend and do some quick beta testing, but there's some that require you to have a very strong backend of different things. And even if you do a specific testing or you do a generic testing, the responses that you get, if it's, I see them bordering on intolerance. It's really, really, it's just like asking someone to go watch a bad movie. You can't ask them to go watch a bad movie. Maybe 40 years ago, people would go watch a movie anyway. but that's one of the good things because that keeps us in the professions. It's also one of the tough things that isn't getting much easier.
So one of the stuff, Jay, this question for you. One of the stuff, at one point, people in Bangalore were frightened that, the entire road is going to be full of home delivery people and cabs. And yeah, so that kind of talks hard about the trend-following method of startups and it's a trend-driven tech startup world. How do you keep your objective and not follow the herd in designing products? Like, for example, mobile only. I'm not poking fun at anybody, but wearables, IoT, these are all stuff. I mean, house delivery stuff, home, aggregators, cabs. So, what's your point of view?
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think we tend to sort of get swept up by trends, get completely drowned in trends. The root has to be users. I think you need to keep rooting it back to your users. Where are they going? I think the idea is that you build it for a certain set of people. Go where they are going, lead them, but don't necessarily kind of assume that they're all going to go in the herd mentality kind of thing. I think it's very, the way users, and you and I are also users, all of us are users at some level, and we are makers at some level. But I think how things succeed or fail, at some point of time, there is, of course, a dark art to it kind of thing. There is, as when I put it, there's not always an exact science to it kind of thing. But I think as long as you keep true and remain true to where your users are bound to go or will go, eventually help lead them. Having said that, there's of course, with every organization, especially if you're a large organization with deep pockets, you want to experiment with things which are very unique, cutting edge, even knowing that things will not go anywhere or will not succeed. I think you want to just put a stake in the ground. In technology world, first mover is not always an advantage, unlike typical business world. If you look at the first mover, this is a lot of disadvantage. People learn from your failures and they will do better than what you did kind of thing. I think that's one thing that you've got to keep in mind. And therefore kind of be mindful, but not be kind of just overswept by trends. Right. Just keep doing a dipstick, keep kind of checking with users, keep kind of hearing, listening. I think that's very, very important for all of us. I think the other one, which I am very, very kind of passionate about, and I keep telling my team and probably many other people, is that you are a user, you are not the user. I think everyone pretty much assumes that I am the user, but you are just one type of users. You are making it for many types of users. I think make sure that you're talking to a bunch of people who represents views which are not your own. Otherwise, we tend to get into a herd where, let's say, designers talking to designers, and we all have a common agreement, and we say, this is the way it is, and that's the way the world should think, because designers think that way. Same may go for product managers and so on. Wear multiple hats, be humble to sort of understand that this is not the way, your view of the world is not the way it is.
Yeah, so from that sense, Jay, I would think that this kind of a forum is way more special than sitting in forums which is full of designers who pat each other's back, hug each other, get out, forget about it. And yeah, this is kind of useful and good in one sense. We are kind of moving on to the next part, which is the enabling project management, technology, working with the tech team, and so on. So, Deepak, do you believe designers are good project managers? Do they manage team timelines?
So, speaking from experience, so I have managed multiple disciplines, and this is the world of agile development. Things happen so quickly, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. But the key being, no one can afford to be in a cocoon anymore. I think that's key. Like, no discipline can afford to go and build things on their own. They'll miss a certain significant part of it. So I'll pivot the question and say, I think it all depends on the individual. I think a good designer, a great designer, will manage teams well, will manage time well. So it depends on the individual. So I don't think it depends on the discipline. It depends on the individual and that individual's particular discipline. So I think the same goes for any discipline, product managers, engineering, sales. They take the trouble out to actually communicate, collaborate with other disciplines to take points of view as well and accommodate within the product. I think that's incredibly key. So it's much larger than a particular discipline being in a cocoon. So I
Yeah,
think that's,
yeah. Vinay, you worked on the entire life cycle as a company, so what are your thoughts
Just
on
think about being good managers.
it?
When I was in design school, I went to design school inside of a tech campus, and we were forced to take some sort of outside electives, and this is really long time ago, but I clearly remember this. So we were 6 of us in a class of 72 industrial engineers taking a course called Systems of Management, and it was fascinating because it was we had nothing to do with it, and we were taking this course, and as it turned out, the 6 of us turned up in the top 10 in the end of the semester. So yeah, to that I think as a race, I think we must pat ourselves on the back. We probably are reasonably good managers, partly because of what I said earlier. There's so many tunnel visions that you're trying to synthesize into something that's cohesive, and that is management by itself. You unfortunately cannot. It would be art if you were just designing just for yourself or just by yourself and for no one else. So as far as the process goes, there is, of course, a minimum structure that you would all want. But the truth is, 50% of it is, I think, serendipity. You stumble on from one thing to the other. There's dialogue, there's conversation. One thing that we like to do is have as much more dialogues as possible, as many more face-to-face things as possible. It's not easy, given Bangalore's traffic, but it's something that must be done. And just those little things tend to make massive differences. The other thing is, the ability to pivot very often. If you're working with a startup, most of the founders have, ADHD. So they've got a new idea coming every hour, partly because of what they read or what somebody else told them. Or they're on to the next thing. They're like, okay, I can make so much more money with that one. So there's just, I think, bringing all of that together in a cohesive fashion is part and parcel of doing design. So by that yardstick, I think we're all pretty good managers.
So Jay, the question for you is this, right? So you worked in service companies, which are actually manage design teams in companies. You also worked in product companies in Adobe or even in Flipkart right now. So what's the difference in life cycle? I mean, is it different at all?
I think the first thing is that you can't fire your clients. It's probably the first difference. These are guys with you for life, kind of, or almost there, kind of thing. But yeah, there are differences. I mean, you can choose your clients wisely in a kind of consulting organization or a service organization. Typically, what happens is that you go wide as opposed to deep. You are jumping from project to project. You learn a little about a lot, and on the other hand, you learn a lot about little. So I think in this case, in a case like an Adobe, I mean, I think again, I'm sure Deepak would agree, in an organization like Adobe, which has multiple products, you do have a choice of multiple products to sort of put your efforts or sort of time into. So you still have some variety, but you can go deeper and deeper and deeper into that product. I mean, you kind of live and breathe that product kind of thing. I mean, it was an honor for me when I think that Illustrator is one product which I have used for so many years, and I've been working on that. I mean, we have been writing features for that. We are seeing how designers react to that, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, but it's real, it's kind of thing. So you go much deeper into that, you understand everything. On the other hand, there is some amount of variety and fun in also doing the wider thing. But each one calls for different skill sets. I think designers by nature are sort of typically like the variety. I tend to see that even within product organization, they would love to sort of come and say, hey, can I move to another product? Because I'm getting bored, it's been a year, 2 years kind of thing. That's actually a lot for designers kind of thing. So I think product organizations definitely require designers with more focus, greater attention spans, willingness to give it a much longer kind of effort as such. With a service company, that's far better, easier, faster kind of thing. So I think each has its own pros and cons. I think everyone should work on two to sort of understand that. But increasingly, I'm seeing that product companies are allowing you, given the nature of designers, nature of product managers. Actually, product managers and designers are not very different in many ways. They're almost similar kind of thing. They are individualistic. They have that whole thing about I want to do something great for this feature or product or so on. I think, yeah, some amount of moving around, and you've got probably a good happy balance there.
So I'm kind of moving to the last part of this stuff, then we can open for questions. And the last question is this, right? Let's get together and predict a few things if possible, right? So what do you think are there any technology, future trends? Is there a new trend around the corner? Is there something in mobile, gestural, wearable? What's going to happen in India? Are there going to be some verticals that are going to be more interested in design and technology than anybody else? Vinay?
Tough question, actually. So there clearly are a lot of things. Are they discernible as things that will have serious impact that we're going to notice and say that that was the black swan effect, that black swan that went and changed the entire industry? I'm not so sure, but there are a lot of small trends that are coming. One of which I just spoke about is a lot of change in interfaces, partly because people have already got app overload and so on. The other thing is in terms of industries that have not quite made the most of either design or technology, I think many of the old elephants are there. Yeah? I think something is going to change in banking completely in a few years. I don't mean the banks are going to go, but banks as we know them won't be there. There's peer-to-peer lending, there'll be something else. It'd be pretty exciting. There's also going to be things like sports where we will have overload of measuring every single thing. I think that's going to come. I remember our first project in sports was a sports analytics thing where we built something for the iPad where there was an app that this coach is very quickly, there's a run, it's 5 seconds. And in that, he has to observe, 50 things, and in the next 1 minute after it's done, when there's a break, has to write down lots of things. And how quickly can you do this? Because players are bought and sold based on those analytics. And not then, but they are now. So I think those kind of industries are going to see some really interesting things happening.
Mm-hmm. Jay?
So I think the interesting opportunity lies at the seams. So essentially in the middle of two things, where would, let's say, rural and technology, agriculture and technology, something like that, which we haven't explored. I think, again, going back to Deepak and what he was mentioning about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we somehow are kind of fulfilling the higher ends because those are the sort of things which people like us relate to. We probably have our roti kapla or our house and the food taken care of, or essentially food has to be taken care of with the delivery boys and all the sort of guys delivering food stuff. But I think if you go one level below or a few levels below, that's where a huge market is. I think that's where we're talking about banking, finance, agriculture, all those kind of things where there's millions of Indians who are still disenfranchised. I think how do we enfranchise those people? That would be an interesting area.
Yeah, so sorry. One of the stuff that I've always kind of, I agree with you heavily is that if we actually focus a little bit more on regional and vernacular and ability to kind of convert our complicated script system into something that is displayable properly, half this problem would be sorted, I would think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I think this is where the whole thing is. So I have a very wonderful friend called Golden Krishna in the Bay Area. So Golden Krishna has written a book called No UI, and he talks about how UI has to go away kind of thing, pretty much like what Vinay was talking about. I think that's where you will see a confluence of the next version of things where you probably have a retina scanner or a fingerprint scanner and all those kind of things, where it makes language probably secondary in terms of interactions. How do we do other things? Of course, there's a bunch of complexity, and we are not going to get there very soon, because for everything you also have a break, and you can have ways of hacking things and doing a whole bunch of other negative stuff. But I think that's where the interesting thing will lie. How do you transcend input mechanisms, and how do you transcend language and script and all those kind of issues? How do you do that kind of thing? If you look at kind of like, again, going back to another example I was mentioning earlier, that WeChat which is in China, I think that again is a very interesting paradigm. I mean, that doesn't exist in the Western world kind of thing. So if you think about what is the equivalent of WeChat? We always keep thinking about the Twitter of X. X is the Twitter of Y. But what about this is a WeChat kind of thing? It's the paradigm changing thing that we should be looking at. That's where the interesting things would be typically kind of for me.
Deepak?
So I'd like to just ride on what Jay said. I think till now we have been looking at the top 3 layers of Maslow's pyramid, and not the bottom 2, physiological and safety. You know, the migrant situation, you know, all of these set of things. You know what's happening in India, which is a lot of people don't even have access to education and technology. And credit to Facebook, as well as for Microsoft trying to use the white space. But I do think access is key. Only if you have access to technology can even ride on technology. I think that's a huge, huge thing. Once you have access to technology, you can do a bunch of things. I think intelligent assistants are, I think, key. When I talked about Echo, there's Cortana, there's Siri. There's a bunch of technologies out there where you don't even have to have an interface. You just use voice, retina scans, a bunch of other things. HoloLens has gestures. There's a bunch of things that many companies are kind of doing, in which hopefully will get access to the disenfranchised right now. I think that's key. I mean, most of the folks, including me, and folks over here, we are working on the top 3. I would urge you to kind of work on the bottom 2. I think that's key, at least in some part, some way, think of those guys. Because technology, we are very lucky. We are probably the top 1% of the population. Let's look at the bottom, at least 50%. We have a lot. That's the key thing that we have to kind of do. So yeah.
So one thing I want to, we're going to open the floor for questions, but I want to close this with a thought that, I mean, I see a lot of questions in Quora. What's the most optimal startup team, right? So I would seriously urge you guys to think about ability to use people who have got design thinking back. I'm not calling them designers, by the way. People who have design thinking background, people who can actually, so the optimal team for me would be somebody who's good at business, somebody who's good at technology, and somebody who's good at design, who can actually bring that stuff together to make a product. And it's a life cycle which is long. You heard all of them say that it's a life cycle much longer. So doing a UX or doing something where the interactivity happens is not an afterthought. It has got to kind of start with that and end along with it. It's got to ride the entire product life cycle. With that, we've got to applaud these gentlemen out here. Thank you for your time, all of you. And